AI is seemingly replacing programming jobs left and right. Companies are freezing hiring, they're laying off developers, and a lot of people are saying that development or software development as we know it will be done and over in the next few years. How much of this is just caught up in the AI hype? How much of this is conjecture? What's the reality? Where are we actually at? So, to actually answer any of those questions, we need to have a few pieces of experience to give us an informed opinion. Number one, you have to have sort of C-suite decision-making experience with, piloting projects from a really high level. Secondarily, you have to have experience working on projects from a project management perspective once you already have goals and objectives and you're trying to get a project done and working with a development team. Thirdly, you need to have actual boots on the ground programming experience, working with different languages, working with different compiled systems and frameworks and libraries, working with developers, and actually understanding how code works on the ground. And I happen to have all of those pieces of experience. So my name is Cameron. I run a multi-million-dollar software development company. We've worked with some of the biggest projects in the world, including work with NASA, Steelcase, Bissell. Um, we've worked on some really complex projects, and I have personally worked on code pretty much every day of my life. I did my first paid project when I was 14 years old. I started coding when I was 10 years old. I'm 32 now, so I have been coding for my entire life. And honestly, the thing that, just transparently, I should come on here and tell you, hey, AI is really bad at its job and it's never going to take over and all that sort of thing. That would be in my best interest as someone who has made a lot of money off of programming over the years. The majority of, the way that I've supported myself and my family has been programming in some way, shape, or form. Now, I'm not really going to tell you that exactly. I'm just going to be very honest about where I think AI is at right now, where I think it's going, what my experience of AI as a day-to-day programmer is like. So let's just talk about it. A few things I have noticed that have changed really quickly with AI. AI coding was a big overnight change because all of a sudden you sort of had this interactive thing that you could work with as you were developing code. I'll lay out four things that happened as soon as we got AI and code that have been getting better and better. Number one, I will say we spend a lot less time debugging. So when you are working on projects, a lot of time will just be debugging time, right? You'll say, oh, I worked on, this particular feature for 8 hours today. And, in the past, um, 4 of those hours might have been working on one really difficult bug that you just couldn't quite get over. Sometimes 6 of those hours, of working on a piece of functionality, you would be working on one particular bug. That can still be the case. You can work on some things that are very difficult, but a lot of the time now, AI is able to do a very good job debugging. So you can have it kind of take a look at the code that you have, and it's able to really quickly find syntax errors. It can really quickly, figure out logical conditions and things like that that don't work, and diagnose issues if you're trying to parse through arrays and things like that. So that can be really, really helpful. It has really reduced debugging time. So that's one of the first things that I have noticed. It is not always good at that, right? So sometimes the more popular the problem you're trying to solve, the more likely it is going to be able to help you with that problem. I had a particular problem where I was using Shopify's API, and I was trying to get some meta object values a couple days ago, and I just couldn't get it. I was trying to have an AI like fix the code that I was writing, and it just could not do it. I ended up having to basically do the whole thing myself. So there are definitely, many, 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 many scenarios where human programmers still have to read the documentation, test different things, get in communication with the people who wrote a particular package or whatever. But there are definitely a lot of cases where debugging is a lot easier. It's just the more popular the problem, the more likely AI can solve it. And the more obscure the problem, the less likely you are to get help with it. A lot of times also AI can, give you, it can just bark up the wrong tree, so to speak, right? So it can end up going down a rabbit trail, debugging or building something that you're like, man, um, I spent a lot of time going down that trail because I thought that was useful and it really wasn't. So that can happen too, but I would say overall, I would say AI has probably automated 50 to 75% of my like day-to-day debugging, which is pretty great in many ways because that's not always a part of programming that I enjoy. I like building things and I like building things, efficiently and not being stuck on a bug I can't solve for an untold amount of hours. Um, the second thing I will say is that it really, really helps with writer's block. So, programmers just like writers, we get writer's block where, we sit down and we stare at a computer and we say, "Oh man, how am I going to write this? Okay, I got to think about this, I got to think about that, I got to think about that." When ChatGPT first came out, so I've done a lot of writing in my life as well, right? I have really enjoyed creative writing, writing fiction, writing nonfiction, all that sort of thing. I've done tons of copywriting for websites and softwares and applications and marketing copy and all that sort of thing. And what I said as soon as we got ChatGPT and were able to get some first draft copy out of it, I said, this is great because I'm no longer starting with a blank canvas. It just gives me something to hate. I've always said that over the years. If we weren't sure exactly what a client wanted or whatever, I just said, hey, let's just get a first draft down. Let's give them something to hate. Because, when you don't like something, it becomes so much more clear what you actually want and what you would like. You can look at that and go, oh, not like that. Well, how do I know not like that? Oh, because I think like this. And so getting that first draft of code, even if it's bad, can be really helpful. Normally it can take me, 15 minutes to an hour and a half to get rolling on a new piece of functionality or a segment within a software or something like that. It takes me a little while to get into the groove of it, and AI has dramatically helped me to be able to, just kind of break through that. Sometimes it'll give me a first draft that just works right out of the gate, and it's really helpful. Sometimes it will not. I absolutely, think that what it's doing is either just wrong, it doesn't work, or I'm like, wow, this would really be bad at scale, or this doesn't combine well with the other systems that we have. And so I say, well, I've got to write this, but at least I kind of know where to start. Um, I would say, thirdly, it gives you that immediate mid-level programmer assistance. There's no AI, whether Claude or Gemini or whatever, at this moment that I feel has the skills of a senior developer who's actually really good and has experience with projects at scale. That's just not where AI is at right now. It just can't do all of the thinking around all of the different pieces of a project to understand what needs to be done and what the overall business goals are and how to tie those into the code architecture, and also just how to like create a scalable solution that fits, the budget of the client, that fits the type of application we're developing, all that sort of thing. Those like larger holistic goals are something that I just don't feel AI can do right now, but it does do a pretty good job at sort of that like junior level programmer work and that mid-level programmer work, and it's immediate, right? So I can kind of come in and I'm writing my stuff and I can say, okay, well, give me this. I'm writing a while loop, finish this loop out for me, or I can give it something that I have already created and say, hey, I built this block functionality. I want you to build another one like this, but with these specs. So you'll see that a lot of these like layoffs that are happening at tech companies, they are happening with companies that have an established product, an established code base. There's, millions of lines of code already written so that you can compare and contrast and say, hey, we want a feature that's like this, built with this kind of code, but we want it to have these requirements. And that's where AI really excels. It's not really excelling right now at building these like out of the box scalable applications that are really great. But it is good at taking existing infrastructure and saying, okay, this is the output. I want to, from a mathematical probability standpoint, I want to make an output that is similar to that, but with these requirements. It does a very good job of probabilistically generating that type of thing. So that's really awesome. And it is great to have a, junior or mid-level programmer just able to assist almost instantly, right? You still do have sort of that delay of like, I'm writing the prompt and I'm waiting for the response and I'm implementing the response and I'm checking the work and I'm not liking some of the work and I send it back. And you still have that whole cycle, right? But it's definitely faster than, let's just say, you were to go into a project management software like Jira or ClickUp or whatever, and you were to like write a task and then you were to assign that to a junior or mid-level developer, and then you were to wait till like the next business day or the one after to get that task back, and then you were to continue writing your thing, you can just kind of keep hammering it out as you go. So it is really helpful to have that like immediate assistance. The fourth thing I will say is that you have a duck. So programmers often talk about having a duck, and at my company, we will oftentimes ask, "Hey, will you be my duck?" This all started when a programmer, I don't know who it was, I don't know when it was, but the legend goes that an initial programmer was so frustrated writing some of the programs that he was doing. It was so complicated, he couldn't think through it, that he decided he just needed to talk it out. He went and grabbed the first anthropomorphic looking thing he had, which was a rubber duck, and he put it on his desk and he said, "All right, I'm going to explain to you what I'm doing here, Mr. Duck. And it's going to help me." And it really helped him just to have someone there that he could explain the thing to, even though the duck couldn't bounce any ideas back. So we at my company will say, "Hey, will you be my duck?" And or like, "I just need a duck for this." And someone else will come and sit with them and be like, "Oh, well, what about this? What about that? Okay. Oh," and they'll explain. And that personal accountability really helps. Having an AI or an LLM working on code with you is a little bit like having that. I'll have long sessions where I'm coding for 6 hours, 12 hours, and I am sort of like having this conversational experience with an AI or an LLM, and it is very helpful in that regard for sure. So, um, I will also say, predicting how long things will take is a little bit easier, and that does actually make sales easier, which is great, a lot of times in programming, things are really difficult to estimate. So, for instance, let's say you have a project that you're like, "Man, I think this is probably about 100 or 200 hours." You might be in a situation where you're like, there are enough unknowns here. I could have enough of those 8-hour bugs or like 24-hour, API interaction messes or whatever, that you might have to just, you know, if you're going with fixed pricing, you might have to quote 300 hours on that, 150-hour project just to make sure you don't eat your lunch on the project. And so you sort of try to see how close you can get with your guesstimates, and you say, "Well, this might go over, but I think, my estimate is only 25% high." And then you eat it on, a few projects in a row, but then, you have some that make up for it, and you just try to get your average in a good place. That's not the most ideal for you, and that's not the most ideal for the client. For the client, obviously, they want to know what a thing is going to cost before they actually buy it. Now, of course, if that thing doesn't exist, it's extremely hard to estimate how long creating a thing that doesn't exist and has no precedent anywhere else is going to take to build. That's just really hard to do. And as sales on a development project, it is really hard to sell something when you don't know exactly how many hours it is. And so you have to either pad it or risk eating it. And so certainly, it's a lot easier to say, "Okay, I'm actually reasonably certain this is going to be, 150 hours," thanks to the use of AI to help debug and write some of the junior level code and stuff like that. It's a lot more palatable to hand that to a client and say, "Hey, this is going to be 150 hours. We've got some good efficiencies here." And rather than, giving them that larger quote, you can certainly get a lot more quotes approved. You can get a lot more work done. So I'm extremely happy with AI from that perspective. Now, I have seen a rapid growth in AI's ability to work on programming projects. I do also see massive gaps that require human intervention, interaction, and knowledge. At this particular moment, I really, quite honestly, I do think that AI is going to be able to do all programming jobs and essentially all white collar, uh, knowledge worker type jobs at some point. I do think that's going to be the case. We always find that way to like technologically break through. Um, I think that it might be a little bit longer than we are thinking before AI can really like replace um, a knowledgeable programmer or a knowledgeable project leader. I think that's the difference, right? So there are programmers who can implement a segmentation of requirements, right? They get a list of requirements and they write code to meet those requirements. I think that type of programmer is probably going to be, by the wayside very soon. I think that the type of programmer who is going to actually become more valuable is the type who's able to understand all these complex systems and business goals and is able to sort of like drive a larger scale project and be reactive and utilize all these different systems and tools and things like that. You're sort of a little bit more of an agile pilot trying to go really fast, and enabled to go at supersonic speeds. So you're sort of like racing at supersonic speeds with the help of AI and all these different frameworks and tools and things like that. And that's like the developer experience versus this like you plan out this really lengthy thing and all that. It is a lot like being a trip planner in the modern day, right? If you were a trip planner in the past, you would say, okay, we have to have, 40 gallons of water and we have to have all this prepackaged food and we have to have like, maybe we'll take camels or maybe we'll take horses or whatever, and we're going to have a team and all that sort of thing. All of that is like a lot, right? That you would have to sort of like package into this experience. And, now it's a little bit more like planning a modern trip where you're like, okay, I'm gonna get on, I'm gonna get on a travel, website or Google Flights or whatever you happen to do and figure out the flights and figure out the hotels and figure out where all of these individual things go really fast, but it still takes a really long time in the aggregate for that person who is overall like working on the coordination of the project and all that sort of thing. I think that is the sort of experience that programming is going to be as we, go into the modern programming age. I do think it is going to AI is, potentially going to plateau, and it's going to take longer than we think for it to be able to really like do those larger scale, more complex things. But I do think that sort of like starfighter pilot, fast, 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 experience, piloting all these different parts of the fleet is going to be more what programming is going to be like. So, I will say that, I had a day, it was a day before yesterday, I want to say, where I did a ton of tasks, and literally every single task I did the entire day, I was piloting an AI to like functionally do the task to some extent. And it was shocking how little I was actually able to get done, even with AI supercharging everything, right? I still had so many opinions and thoughts and details I needed to include, and really complex prompts I needed to write and all that sort of thing. And it just took a long time, even though I basically had AI to supercharge every single step of the way. So projects are really hard, and I think, if you have been in the project management space, you've been in, you know, the C-suite decision-making space, you kind of realize that there are a lot of variables that need to be solved to get any given thing done. There are many, many, many competing, conflicting variables that all need to be thought of and that go into the final decision, and into the final product. And so many things need to be tweaked and adjusted, that this promise that AI is just going to like do all of that is, probably dramatically overly simplistic. I do think it is going to be able to at some point. I don't think we're there, especially with the amount of like especially with the amount of, data that we have, the amount of processing power that we have, the amount of, just time that it takes to go back and forth with the AI and things like that. I think humans are going to be valuable for work for quite a while, but it's definitely not going to look the same. So that's my experience as a programmer. If you are interested in an AI powered development firm helping you out with a project, let us know. But I wanted to mostly just, share my thoughts on where the world is at in the midst of all this AI stuff and what being a programmer is like in the middle of it. It's going to be a wild ride. I don't know what we're about to experience next, but I I just have a feeling that things are going to all the things that we knew how to do as patterns are, yeah, they're going to get overtaken, but we're going into this world where there's going to be a million problems to solve. And, I believe that people will still be valuable because they are solving the problems. And that's going to be around for a while, honestly. So yeah, hope this was helpful. Hit me up if you have questions.